In 2003, a team of geneticists published a paper in the American Journal of Human Genetics that contained a single sentence which has not stopped being remarkable since. Roughly 1 in every 200 men alive today, they wrote, carries a Y chromosome that traces back to a single man who lived in Mongolia approximately 1,000 years ago. 1 in 200, that is 16 million living men, possibly more, all carrying the same genetic signature, the same Y chromosome haplogroup in their cells right now. All descendants through the direct male line of the same person. The paper did not name him, but the mathematics pointed in one direction. The timing, the geography, and the historical record all converged on the same candidate. Genghis Khan, the man who built the largest contiguous empire in human history, and apparently also one of the most consequential genetic events in the history of our species. By any measure, Genghis Khan was one of the most powerful individuals who ever lived. Born Temujin around 1162 in the steppes of Mongolia, he began life as the son of a minor tribal leader, kidnapped as a child, enslaved as a teenager, and left with almost nothing. He rebuilt himself through alliances, military campaigns, and a ruthless elimination of rivals. By 1206, he had unified all the nomadic tribes of the Mongolian plateau under his leadership and taken the title Genghis Khan, meaning something close to universal ruler. By the time he died in 1227, his empire stretched from the Pacific coast of China to the Caspian Sea, covering roughly 11 million square miles. The campaigns that built this empire were devastating. Historians estimate that the Mongol conquests killed somewhere between 30 and 40 million people, at a time when the global population was perhaps 400 million. Entire cities were erased, agricultural systems were destroyed, populations that had existed for thousands of years were reduced to remnants. What the historical record also documents, though historians discussed it less, was the reproductive behavior of Mongol rulers. Genghis Khan and his male descendants had access to enormous numbers of women in conquered territories. This was not incidental. It was, in the context of medieval conquest, expected. The question was whether this access left a genetic trace large enough to detect 1,000 years later. The 2003 paper suggested it did, on a scale that nobody had anticipated. The study that changed everything analyzed Y chromosome data from 2,123 men across a wide swathe of Asia, from the Pacific coast to the Caspian. The Y chromosome, like mitochondrial DNA, is passed from parent to child without recombination. A son inherits his father's Y chromosome, almost unchanged. This makes it another kind of biological clock, and another way to trace ancestry backwards through the male line. What the researchers found was a cluster of very closely related Y chromosome sequences, spread across a huge geographic area. The cluster was too widespread and too genetically similar to have emerged by chance. Something specific had caused it. Some single founder or small group of founders had reproduced at a rate so far above normal that their Y chromosome now appeared in populations across a massive region of Asia. The researchers called it the star cluster, because on a phylogenetic tree, it looks like a star, one central ancestral sequence with many branches radiating outward. The star cluster appears in roughly 8% of men in the region studied. In some Central Asian populations, the frequency is much higher. Among Hazara men in Afghanistan, a group with a strong oral tradition of descent from Genghis Khan, the frequency approaches 60%. The geographic distribution of the cluster maps almost precisely onto the territory of the Mongol Empire at its peak. The timing of the common ancestor, calculated from the mutation rate of the Y chromosome, places the founder approximately 1,000 years ago. The combination of timing, geography, and frequency pointed to one conclusion. The mechanism that produced 16 million male line descendants is not mysterious. It requires only that a man and his sons have children with very large numbers of women over several generations, and that those children in turn reproduce widely. Genghis Khan had multiple wives and an unknown number of concubines. Historical sources suggest dozens of wives and hundreds of concubines across his lifetime. His sons, who inherited his empire and his access to conquered populations, continued this pattern. Ogadai, Chagatai, Tolui, and Jochi Each controlled vast territories and each produced large numbers of children. Genghis Khan himself reportedly had hundreds of children, though the exact number cannot be known. What is known is that the Mongol ruling class maintained reproductive access to conquered peoples across a region spanning most of Asia for roughly 2 centuries. That is enough time, across enough generations, to produce the genetic pattern the 2003 paper described. The researchers noted that this kind of founder effect, where one man's Y chromosome becomes dramatically overrepresented in a population, is almost always associated with social power. Ordinary men do not produce 16 million male-line descendants. Only a man at the top of an extreme social hierarchy with inherited power passed through sons who also inherit that power can generate this kind of genetic signature. They identified similar, though smaller, founder effects in other historical dynasties. The Manchu rulers of China, a ruler in Ireland sometime around 400 AD, probably Nile of the 9 hostages. The pattern appears wherever extreme political power was held by men who passed it to their sons over multiple generations. But none of these other founder effects come close to the scale of the star cluster. What Genghis Khan and his descendants achieved genetically is unprecedented in the documented record. The implications of this discovery extend beyond the specific case of the Mongols. It suggests that major historical events, wars, conquests, the rise and fall of empires, do not just reshape politics and culture, they reshape the human gene pool directly. The Mongol conquests killed tens of millions of people. They also ensured that one man's Y chromosome would spread to tens of millions more. The same event that removed genetic diversity on one side of the ledger added it on the other. The net effect on the human genome is not straightforward. Researchers have since identified the star cluster Y chromosome in populations as far west as Hungary and as far east as Korea. The spread follows the territory of the empire closely, but not perfectly. There are pockets of the chromosome in places where Mongol armies passed through but did not settle permanently, and there are gaps in places where the army did settle, suggesting the actual transmission was more complex than simple conquest. It is worth stepping back and appreciating the sheer scale of what this implies about history and genetics. Before the 2003 paper, the dominant assumption in genetics was that genetic diversity spread through populations relatively evenly over time. War and conquest were treated as disruptive, but ultimately not the dominant force shaping the gene pool. The star cluster discovery challenged that assumption directly. It suggested that extreme social inequality, the kind produced by conquest empires, could have an outsized and long-lasting effect on genetic diversity. The most powerful men reproduced at rates so far above the norm that their lineages could dominate entire geographic regions a millennium later. More recent studies have attempted to find Genghis Khan's Y chromosome in ancient DNA from burial sites in Mongolia. The work is ongoing and difficult because the relevant burial sites are contested and politically sensitive. Mongolian authorities have been protective of sites that may relate to Genghis Khan's burial, which remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of archaeology. There are things the science cannot confirm. The 2003 paper was careful never to explicitly name Genghis Khan. This caution was scientifically appropriate and worth explaining. The identification is a strong inference based on timing, geography, and historical record, not a direct DNA comparison to a confirmed biological sample from the man himself. No confirmed biological remains of Genghis Khan have ever been analyzed. His burial site is unknown. For centuries, this was deliberate. According to tradition, those who attended his burial were killed to preserve secrecy, and the site was concealed to prevent desecration. Without a direct sample, the identification remains an inference, though an extraordinarily strong one. The alternative explanation, that some other man at the same time and place produced the same genetic pattern, requires a coincidence that strains credibility. Some researchers have also argued that the star cluster may represent not Genghis Khan specifically, but the Mongol ruling clan more broadly. Several of his male relatives and ancestors may have contributed to the cluster. This would not change the scale of the phenomenon, only the precise identification of the single founder. 16 million men. possibly more by now, all carrying the same Y chromosome haplogroup in their cells, all connected through the unbroken male line to a man who lived in Mongolia 800 years ago and built the largest land empire the world has ever seen. The science is not disputed. The star cluster exists. Its frequency, its distribution, and its age are established facts. The identification with Genghis Khan specifically is a strong and widely accepted inference. No credible alternative explanation has been proposed. What the discovery illuminates is something uncomfortable about the relationship between power and genetics. The men whose Y chromosomes spread were not necessarily the most intelligent or the most creative or the most moral members of their societies. They were the most powerful. And power, in this context, meant reproductive access on a scale that most people can barely imagine. There is an irony in this that history rarely foregrounds. The Mongol Empire is remembered primarily for destruction. The cities burned, the populations massacred, the agricultural systems collapsed. All of that is real and documented. But the genetic record shows something else running alongside the destruction. An extraordinary proliferation of life, of children, of lineages, that would outlast the empire by 8 centuries and counting. History remembers Genghis Khan for what he built and what he destroyed. Genetics adds a third category: what he left behind. In 16 million living men who have never heard of the star cluster and have no idea they carry it. The case is open. The Kahn never left. And if you are a man of Central Asian, East Asian, or South Asian descent, there is a reasonable possibility that some portion of what you just heard is about you personally. The star cluster is not an abstraction. It is a chromosome. And it may be in your cells right now, copied faithfully from father to son since the 12th century, carrying no record of its origin, no memory of the empire, no sense of the scale of what it represents. Just a sequence of nucleotides, passed quietly forward through time, waiting for a laboratory to finally ask where it came from.